and welcome back to Crafted by Corie. If you're new, I'm Corie. Welcome to my channel. If you're returning, thank you as always for being here. You are amazing. I am super excited because I have a compilation of all of the patriotic DIYs that I've done. So let's go ahead and get right on into the crafting.
DIY number 1. All right, I have, these are actually 4 little candlestick holders that I had glued together. These have been in my stash for years. I mean, before I started my YouTube channel, I had started creating decor for my wedding, and then COVID happened, and yeah. So anyway, I didn't end up using them. So I've been using them for crafting. I started to go to paint this with my chalk paint and realized I really wanted to have something on top of it to support my candles. So I went back to my stash, grabbed these little ceramic plates, also from the Dollar Tree, and I got them cleaned up and ready to apply to the top of those. So I'm going to be using my E6000, which is also what I had used to secure these glass candlestick holders together originally. And that bond is solid, you guys. It's really, really strong. So I'm applying a little bit of the E6000 to every other corner of this base, and then I'm going to, in the opposite corners, apply some hot glue so that I get that immediate bond and then the long-term hold. So once I have this set down on here, and the reason I put it on the corners is because that's what's touching that lip on the plate. It's not setting down inside on the flat surface, right? So that was what I needed to do to get this to work. So I did go back and fill in with some additional hot glue around the edges and just trying to smooth that out a little bit. The glue has been cooling very quickly. First of all, it's on glass, which it tends to cool more quickly. And then I'm also in my basement, so it's cooler down there. But went ahead and did the same exact thing with the other. And then I was ready to give everything a couple of good coats of chalk paint. This is my Adirondack white. I painted the entire surface twice, top to bottom. And then I was ready to just set them aside to dry completely. All right, so while those are drying the rest of the way, I am going to grab out this napkin. Here is my napkin hack. I did this with another set of candles a few months ago when I was starting on spring projects, and I loved how the candles turned out. So I thought it would be really fun to do it again with this flag napkin. I am gonna peel it apart so that it's just a single ply. This happens to be a 2-ply napkin as opposed to 3-ply. So just be aware, a lot of napkins, especially the fancy hand towel ones, they tend to be 3-ply. So just make sure you get a single ply the way that you would if you are going to be decoupaging. And actually with this particular project, because the wax melts through it, it might not be such a big deal, but I don't know, better safe than sorry. So I am just measuring my little candle here. I'll get them unraveled. But essentially I'm going to be looking for grabbing just the stripes for the one candle, and then I'm going to grab the stars for the other candle. So I'll be cutting down strips of the napkin in just a moment. So oh, and I guess before I did that, I wanted to make sure that my little iron was going to be ready. So that's my little mini easy press. You can use a regular iron with this. I just happen to have my easy press in my craft, room, and it's easy to manipulate. But now that I have my little strips cut out, I'm going to line this up to the best of my ability. I was trying really hard to make sure that the stripes were lining up with each other. So if you're particular like I am. That's something you'll want to just try and keep in mind. So once I measured it around, I went ahead and trimmed it off. Now, the first time that I did this type of thing with the candles a few months ago, I had trimmed it to try to make it butt up with itself so that it wouldn't overlap. And I ended up with a little bit of a gap. So this time I decided I was going to let it overlap by about a 1/4 inch, and I think it worked out just fine. Also, I was struggling to try and get it super tight around the candle, and you want to make sure it's as tight as possible so that you don't end up having like creases in your napkin and your candle. But I found that once I used the parchment paper, that's what I have wrapped around this. You don't want to go at this just right on top of the candle or on top of the napkin, or you're going to end up with wax all over your iron. Make sure you wrap it in butcher paper or parchment paper. I'm using parchment paper. But I found when I started wrapping it with the parchment, that helped me get a tighter wrap with the napkin. So keep that in mind. It might save you a few minutes in trying to get that done. So you can see I'm wrapping it around the top and bottoms of the candle as well. And with this particular one, it's, perfectly fine. And the bottom, I would say, is great to wrap all the time. The top here, because it's a white candle and it's a white stripe, it blended perfectly and you don't even notice that it's wrapped around the top of it. With the blue here, I'm going to end up doing the same thing. Now, I did not do that the first time I tried this project with the napkins on the candles. I had cut it so that it would be just a straight edge butting up against the top edge of the candle. And it was fine, but I at the time thought, oh, maybe it would have been nice to wrap it around the top of the candle. So I tried it with this one, and I don't know that I'm such a fan of what I did. So you'll have to take a look at it when I get it done here and let me know your thoughts. If I had to do it again, again with the red and white stripes, because the white stripe was wrapped around, it's completely camouflaged. You don't see it. With the blue, you're gonna see it, and I don't think I'm a fan of it. To do it, if I had to do it again, I probably for the blue one would not wrap it. I would make sure that I'm lining up my cut edge with the top of the candle so that it just ends with the candle edge. But I would have done the same wrapping with the other one, if that's making sense, because where it's going to blend in and be camouflaged, I think that that's probably the best way to do it. But where it is going to be obvious, I don't know. I mean, I don't hate it, but I'm not so sure that I love it either. So anyway, you take a look at this and tell me what you think. So I've got that all wrapped. I'm gonna just iron at the top of it again to get that sealed. So now you can see how both of those look. So you can see on the red and white one, you can't tell. Okay, now I'm coming in with my ribbon. We're back with the candlestick holders. They are all dry now. And I'm going to add some bows to the front. So I have my scissors. I'm just making little loop bows, and I don't know if that's the correct term for them, but the lengths of ribbon, if I had to guess, it's probably about 14 to 15 inch lengths of ribbon, and I'm kind of making a circle, pinching it in the middle, and then I'm going to take another piece of ribbon and tie a knot around the middle to secure it. The additional length of ribbon, I'm guessing, was probably about 10 inches. Wrapping that around and tying that off, and I'm going to use that for the tails. So gonna just make sure it's nice and secure. Get my bows all fluffed up the way that I want them, and then I'm going to be dovetailing my ends. If you're not sure, if you're not familiar with dovetailing, it's basically just a fancy way of saying I'm going to fold the ribbon in half and cut it at an angle so that it looks like a little dove's tail, for lack of a better term. So it kind of cuts a triangle out of the ribbon and makes the edges pretty so they won't fray. Okay, so that one is done. I'm going to do the exact same thing again with the other piece of ribbon. And you'll be able to see it a little bit better this time because I'll be a little bit more on camera, but I'm wrapping it around in a loop, pinching the center there. I'll grab another piece of ribbon that I'll use to tie off in the center. Again, it's probably about 10 inches long, maybe 8, but I think closer to 10. I'm going to tie that off, get it nice and secure and tight. I'll dovetail my ends and then I'll be ready to get them set for the candlestick holders. There's the dovetailing. And then I'm going to be grabbing some shorter pieces of ribbon now. As I get all those little scraps out of the way. I'm going to grab some shorter pieces of ribbon now, and I'm going to lay the candlestick holders down in just a second so you can see what I'm doing. But essentially, I am looking to wrap this around so that it's going to look like the bow was tied directly around the candlestick, but we faked it because the bows will turn out much nicer doing it the way that I've done it versus actually trying to tie them around the candlestick holder. So I trimmed that down and then cut off a second. Actually, did I cut off a second length? I'm going to measure and cut off a second length here in a second if I didn't already. But yeah, I did, so that I knew that I had two of the same. So just a little bit of hot glue on there, tucking that into the hot glue, making sure that it's nice and secure, and that'll allow me to wrap this around nice and tightly. I'm just making sure that the silver edge is visible on top and bottom here so that it keeps the integrity of the ribbon is the wrong way of saying it, but I think you know the design, so it keeps the design intact, the ribbon design. Got that secured down, and I'll trim off that little bit that is sticking out. And once I have that nice and trimmed up, I'll be ready to put my bow right on top of there. So now it's going to look like it was nicely tied around the candle holder. I'm just going to hold that in place until I am confident that it is nice and cool and secure. And then I'll be doing the same exact thing with the other candlestick holder. But I think these turned out super cute. I hope that you like them as much as I do. I hope that this little napkin hack has been helpful. I want to do this with all my candles now. I want to find pretty napkins and blank candles and just fancy them all up and put them around my house. I just think it's so much fun. It's such an easy project, and I think it's impactful. I just have to find some larger plain white pillar candles that don't cost a fortune. So securing that other ribbon, I'm gonna get that trimmed down, apply my bow, and there we go. And these will actually hold larger candles clearly. These little baby pillars that I got from the Dollar Tree fit on here nicely, but these candlestick holders will support a much larger and wider, so taller and wider pillar. But there we have it. Let me know what you think here.
DIY number 2.
All right, I have this burn paste that I got off of Amazon. We're going to try this out. And then I have 6 by 6 inch wood pieces. It's balsa wood that I'm going to be using. Just kind of checking out the jar here. It says that it's non-toxic. I have no idea what this is made out of. So I was a little leery about getting it on my skin. I'm sure that it's fine, but I don't know. It smelled a little funny to me. I'm not sure what I was expecting it to look like, but it was more liquidy than I expected because it was described as a paste, but I would say it was kind of like a thick paint consistency. But I'm going to go ahead and grab one of my little balsa wood squares. These are also from Amazon, and I have one of my chalk couture, they call them transfers. It's basically like a silk screen is the way I would describe it. You can also use a stencil. But I'm just going to rub this down. Clearly, I've used this in the past with actual paint or paste. And I'm going to be applying this burn paste the same way that I would the regular paste, the paint paste. It came with this little squeegee that I'm working with, and I'm just applying it liberally. I wasn't sure how much to put on here. I probably put on more than it needed, but being that I had used this transfer before, and clearly it was shaded with that color of paint that I had used in the past, I was a little nervous about it going through. But you're supposed to let it sit for 2 to 3 minutes, which I did. And now I am removing the transfer or the stencil. And you can see that it clearly came through on here. So I'm grabbing my heat gun and I am going to work on making the burn come through. Now, I have a burn marker that I've used in the past. You can see this is working really well. And the more I heat my burn marker, the darker my burn looks. Now, it looked really dark here on camera, but in person, it just wasn't as dark as I'd wanted it to be, so I kept going. But you might be noticing the more I go, the lighter it's getting. So it got really dark, well, relatively dark, and now it's starting to get light again. So I was like, uh-oh, what's going on? And so I ended up realizing that the more I did that, the lighter it was getting. And if I just left it alone, as it cooled, it was getting darker. But I had that one spot there that just didn't go back. So once it was cool, I figured, you know what, this is meant to be kind of rustic looking to begin with. I figured it would add to the charm. But I have the second transfer that I'm going to go ahead and apply right over top of what I just burned. It was completely dry and the effect was done. And then I have these little packets of paste that I had already used once before, and I'd used them quite a while ago and tried to seal them up just by like taping them shut. Clearly it didn't work real well because they were pretty dried out. So I'm reconstituting it with water. That is one cool thing about the chalk couture paste is that it's water soluble. So when you use it on something, depending on the surface, you can actually clean it off when you're done with that season or whatever and apply a different image or words or whatever else it is that you want to do. So I was able to reconstitute this with the water, and now I'm just going to squeegee it on the same way that I did the burn paste before, but now we're going to be applying the color, obviously. So this was Colonial Blue that I was applying on here. And then I'm going to be doing Candy Apple Red. And I'm peeling it up right there because I have learned from experience that the paste dries relatively quickly. And if you don't work fast enough, and I knew I was going to be slow with having to reconstitute the paste that I was working with, if you don't work quickly enough, it will dry in the transfer, and when you pull the transfer away, it will pull the paste away with it. So I wanted to make sure that that wasn't going to happen, and what I had been taught was that you just peel it back to free it from the transfer, it being the paste, so that it remains deposited on your piece. And then you can continue on. So that is what I did with that. So now I grabbed a few straws out of my stash. These were left over from a pack. I think I must have gotten them at the Dollar Tree, but it's been a while and I don't honestly recall, and I hadn't kept the packaging for it. So these were actually pretty sturdy, I must say, pretty solid. And I was hoping that they were going to help me kind of flatten out my wood, because in the process of using the heat gun on it, it warped it a little bit. So I was kind of hoping that this was going to help it. I would say it helped a little bit, but not to the extent that I needed it to. And I have those other pieces of wood up under there just to help lift it off my surface, so that when I applied the glue right there, it wasn't going to glue it to my table. So I just applied it to one side and then the other, laid down the straws right over top of that bead of hot glue, just making sure that it's all lined up. And you can kind of see here that it's a little warped still. So I figured, you know what, let me try and grab a couple of popsicle sticks and see if I can help straighten it out by supporting the back side of the piece. And this actually worked very well. So I'm going to apply 3 popsicle sticks here. I did the one at that angle, and then I'm going to do 2 more at the other angle that you see there. Just using hot glue, just a single bead down the length of the popsicle stick. I'm going to do that for both of these next 2. Just be careful not to burn yourself. I've had some really bad burns. It doesn't feel good. All right, so applying that down, and so this not only provided some support and got it a little bit more, see how it's not warped anymore? It gave a place to add a little stand. So I'm going to kind of work it into that little corner there. And I realized that it just needed to be about 3 fingers from the back of it. So hopefully you can understand what I'm talking about by seeing what I'm doing here. But trying to figure out what the angle needed to be for it to be a little stand. And I had applied the glue. And once it was cool, it was all good to go with my little stand here. Just applied some additional hot glue to give it some more support. And this was really good to go. So I'll turn it around here in a second for you to see. But let me know what you think of this one. I think it is super cute, and I'll have to give the burn paste another go. DIY number 3. Okay, this is the sign from Dollar Tree. It is just I want to say balsa wood, but that's not quite right. But it's a very light sign. It's got that star cut out. And this is the America stencil I created for the last video that I'd messed up on because it was a little too large for the project, but we are going to use it today. So I'm going to hook up my Cricut Joy because I do have a second stencil that I want to create. So to do that, I went into Canva. If you're not familiar with Canva, it is free software. I love it. Some of the fonts are an upgrade. I don't think I used an upgraded font here, but it is I think it's iMore script, as you can see. I've got it highlighted there towards the bottom. But I had typed out the beautiful and done it in this script, and then I'm going to download it. That's that little icon top right corner with the arrow. And to download this, I want to select it as an SVG file. So that is what I selected here. I'm going to do transparent background, and then I'm going to click on download. And it's going to let me share it to somebody, or I can save it to my drive, which is what I did. And once I had that saved, I went into Cricut and I pulled up my canvas. I opted out of the free trial, but you can certainly try that if you want to. I'm going to click that green plus sign at the bottom, and I said replace because I wanted to clear the canvas. I'm going to start a new project here, and I'm going to select from my photo library. I had clicked on the upload down at the bottom. Hopefully you saw that. But I went and found my file that I had saved. I am going to name it here, which is required. You can see that it has that transparent background. That's what all those little gray squares are. It's just showing that it has nothing behind it. And now it has dropped it onto my canvas so I can work with it. Isn't that fun and exciting? It's the little things in life that make me happy. So this is ready for me to size and get to where I want it. Now, I'm also going to drop in a shape on this because Cricut is really good about maximizing your vinyl space. So it's going to try to put the cutouts, it's, like I said, it's just going to maximize the space. So it's going to try and move everything to the edges of your margins of your vinyl. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about in just a second. But for right now, I'm just going to drop this diamond in here because I am creating this as a stencil. So I want there to be enough room around my letters that I'm cutting out to have it used as a stencil so that it's not right up against the edge and me having trouble trying to paint without going over the edges of the stencil. Hopefully that makes sense. I think it'll make a little bit more sense in a minute when I show you what I'm talking about. So I just dropped a couple of those diamonds around where they'd be out of the way, but to help me create essentially margins around my design. So I'm going to click on matte, and here you can see that it's actually kind of centered it a little bit on my vinyl that I'm going to be doing. So now if I go back and I take those little diamonds away, I had also grouped them and I had clicked attach. So I undid both of those things. So getting rid of the diamonds to show you. So now this is not attached. I'm going to click on matte again and show you what happens when it's not attached. See, because it is just trying to maximize the vinyl. So I'm going to click attach. I'm going to add those. So when I click attach, see, but now it's all up against the margins and I'm not going to be able to use it as a stencil that way. So I went back and I added those little diamonds back in and was ready to go ahead and get it cut. So I am preparing my vinyl. I cut it down to the right size that I needed for this project because I'm using a scrap of 12 by 12 smart vinyl. So I am going to need it on the mat in order to do that. So just getting it all ready, I was double checking the dimensions to make sure my vinyl is the right size because, as you know, I am infamous for thinking I have the dimensions right and then messing them up. So I'm just double checking. I'm going to go ahead and get it loaded. It is measuring my vinyl. Another little double check that I've got the vinyl the right size. And then I can go ahead and tell it to cut. So it is going to cut my design out for me, and then I am going to be ready to weed it. I actually did trim it down a little bit more. I'm trying to remember. I think I actually trimmed it down after I weeded it. That makes sense. But one thing I did not do was tell it to weld everything together. Highly recommend that because if you tell it to weld, it will merge all of the little cuts into a single cut line, if that makes sense, rather than breaking it all up. It'll get rid of the cuts that are in the middle of the letters. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but it'll save you some time in the long run. So just a quick little tip. All right, so there I cut it down just to make sure that it was going to be easier to work with as the stencil that I wanted it to be. Obviously, my stencils are going to overlap a little bit, so I'm going to have to do it in pieces. So doing the America first, I got that onto my transfer vinyl. Just make sure you take your time, especially if you're working with the smart vinyl. The backing on smart vinyl, if you're not familiar with it, is thick as compared to what regular vinyl backing is. It's kind of like more of like a thin plastic, and it's stiff. right? And so trying to remove it sometimes can be a little bit of a challenge, and you just want to make sure that you're not pulling on the vinyl in such a way that it's going to damage or stretch your little vinyl pieces in the corners of where the cutouts are. Again, hopefully that's making sense, but I do sometimes trim it down like that just to make it easier, because if you let it rest back down on itself again, it will just stick again, and it just makes it hard. So take your time. This is, I'll remind you, sped up about 2.5 times regular speed. So I am taking my time more than it looks like. But it's fine. It works. It does its job. It just can take a little bit of working with it there to get the backing off sometimes. So I did use the transfer vinyl, clearly, that has the grid lines on it. And I did that purposely because I have the kind that's clear as well. But I liked the lines for this to help me get my words straight on my sign, essentially. So I used those to my advantage. I'm burnishing it really well, and then I'll peel back my transfer tape and I will be ready to prep this. Now, I am not going to go right in with paint. I am going to show you my matte Mod Podge in just a second. And I guess before I do that, I'm just going to go ahead and prep this other stencil, because why not? I've got the transfer tape ready to go, and I'll prep it for when I'm ready for it in a little bit. But what I was saying about the Mod Podge, if this were a painted sign, then I would totally come in with that background color and stencil with that background color first. But I'm going to use the Mod Podge because this is obviously, I'm leaving it as a wood tone. And what that does is, either way, whether it was painted and I was using the background color or coming in here with the Mod Podge, it is going to help alleviate any bleeding. It's going to seal in my stencil so that if there are any bleeds, it's going to be this clear Mod Podge. Or if it were a painted piece, it would be that same color, background color, that was bleeding, as opposed to the color that I'm going to be applying for the design. So just a neat little trick that will save you a lot of time and aggravation. So it's one more step, but it is well worth it. So I'm just making sure I've got it completely covered from every angle, and then I'm going to make sure it dries really well. I did not use heat on this because I was afraid that it might warp the vinyl or create a bubble or something, or make it too sticky. I don't know. I didn't want to mess with it. So I just waited until it was nice and dry, and now I'm coming in with my Ocean chalk paint. I already forgot whether that was Waverly or Home Decor when I showed it to you. I think it's Waverly. Those are both plaid products, and so I can never remember which one I'm using, but I do know that the color is Ocean. And I'm just using a cosmetic sponge to stipple this on. I love using cosmetic sponges with stenciling because I can cut them down to whatever size I need or want, and it just makes the job really easy. So now I'm ready to peel this all back. I did not wait for it to dry. I don't know whether it would have been fine to let it dry, but I always get a little nervous when I'm working with vinyl, because I've had instances where it's pulled up my paint, especially when, you know, I've got the Mod Podge under there too. I just was nervous about letting it dry fully. So I went ahead and peeled it up. I'm just being very careful not to deposit any of the blue paint onto the areas that I don't want it. So you can see me kind of wiping off my little, I don't even know what this tool is called, but I'm going to call it a pick. So the pick point, I keep wiping it off to make sure that I'm not getting any blue paint on that might risk being applied to the wood where I don't want it as I'm trying to pull up all of these little pieces. So again, just taking my time, going slow, and pulling them up. But look at how sharp the lines are. This turned out so well, and I cannot wait for you to see the finished piece because I think that this it turned out absolutely gorgeous. I am so happy with it. I guess if I were to critique it at all, I might have actually made the America even a little bit bigger than what I have on here. But all in all, I love this piece and I hope that you will love it too. All right, so now I've got the vinyl off. I am giving it some help. I do want to make sure that it is completely dry before I start putting another stencil over it to do the beautiful part. So I'm going to take this opportunity to create the background for that star that's there. This is just a 6-inch piece of balsa wood that I got off of Amazon in a pack of 10 or 20. I forget how many of them. I talked about it in a haul. I think it was a haul video a little while back. But just cutting it down, these are really easy to cut. It's like 3 or 4 little cuts with my my knife, X-Acto knife. And I was able to just break it off and it was perfect. So I'm using my Adirondack White by Home Decor. This one I know is Home Decor. It's probably the only one I can remember. Using my heat gun on this to get it nice and dry. And then I am going to be applying it to the back. Actually, I'm going to let it dry a little bit longer before I actually apply it, but I am going to test it here. Now, you saw I left a couple of areas not painted. That is so that my glue will have better adhesion. I did end up using hot glue for it. You'll see in a little bit. If you want a maximum hold, you could totally use wood glue. E6000 would probably work as well. But now I've got my other stencil ready to set down, and I'm going to be careful. I'm going to be burnishing it really well around the letters themselves, but up in that top left area where it's overlapping the area that I've already painted, I'm going to be real careful not to burnish it where I don't absolutely have to, because I'm nervous about pulling up the paint. Right. And that was part of why I wanted to make sure that that paint was 100% dry. I left it a little bit longer, did that other piece for the star, so that it would have an opportunity to just cure a little bit longer. It turned out fine, spoiler alert. But I was just being uber careful with the way that I was treating it. So peeling my transfer tape away, and then I am going to be ready to come back in with the Mod Podge again. So same exact process. I covered it all completely with the Mod Podge, and then once that was dry, I was going to be ready to paint it, letting it sit and dry a little longer while I actually do apply my little background here. With that cutout, you could totally leave it, but wherever you hang it, that's what color the star is going to be. I wanted my star to be white, so I didn't want to be limited on what wall I could hang it on. So that is why I went ahead and put that backing on it. Totally up to you if you want to do that. I was just trying to get rid of a string of hot glue there. That's what I was doing. And of course I deposited a little bit of blue paint in the process, so I'm just cleaning it up a little bit and giving it some more white. All right, now that this is completely dry, I came in with my crimson chalk paint. I think this is Waverly. Again, I cannot remember. I think it's Waverly, but it is crimson. So that is the shade that I'm using for this. And once I got that all covered, again, I did not wait for it to dry. I went ahead and peeled it right up. I do find that when I use vinyl like this, it does tend to tear around some of the letters as I peel it away. That one little piece is just the diamond shape that I had cut out before to use as creating margins for myself. So that's what that was. But I just slowly peeled this up and then weeded it all out. Again, look how sharp this looks. So happy with how this turned out. Gonna go ahead and peel away those little bits and pieces to get this fully weeded out, and then we'll be ready to go on to the next step. That made me nervous when that little piece of vinyl with the red paint on it went flying. I was like, oh no. And here I just totally scratched the part that needed paint. So I was trying with my sponge to come back in and adjust it, Ultimately, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to hit the little bit that I needed to without getting paint where I didn't want it. So I grabbed that teeny little brush and used that to touch up the part where I had scraped it. I'm leaving it alone for a second, and then I'll go back and pick up that vinyl. And all was well. I did see one other little place that I wanted to touch up, so I did that. And then I am all done with the red. I think this is looking absolutely gorgeous, but leave me a comment and let me know what you think of it so far. All right, so now I've got those little holes on the left side to contend with. That's from the original sign design that had the hanger on it. Clearly we are not hanging this vertically, we are hanging horizontally. So I'm gonna be trimming off that left side. I'm just trying to figure out, making sure that it's gonna be even, and it looks like it's going to be absolutely perfect to have my design centered on the sign once I cut it off. So again, I'm going to use my X-Acto knife and I am just going to trim this down. Now this is not like the balsa wood. It took quite a bit of effort. I would say probably 100 times going over that. I actually did mess up at one point because I pulled my ruler away a little too soon. Eventually I did get out my self-healing mat to cut this through the rest of the way. So it took a little determination, but we got her done. And now I am just sanding it down. Look how good she looks. I love this. So now we just need a hanger. So we'll go ahead and get that done. Now this isn't thick enough for me to use my staple gun. So I am going to be using hot glue. Probably should have used wood glue for a longer hold, but I'm just gonna have at it with the hot glue and see how that does for me for the time being. I'm gonna be generous with it. You might have seen that I just knotted the ends there. I don't know if that's gonna help or not. In my mind, it was gonna give the glue something more to grasp onto. I'm just making sure that there's glue underneath it as well as over top of it, and I'm being very generous with it. And I'm gonna wait until that is 100% cooled down so that I can start pulling on it, because the jute cord will stretch a little bit. And so when I'm hanging it, I don't want that to show up above my design. Now the sign is very light, so I don't anticipate it pulling down on it a lot, but it'll pull a little bit. So I'm gonna stretch this across, apply my glue generously once again, and then I'm just gonna hold it until it's completely dry. You saw me like waving at it, trying to help it dry. DIY number 4. All right, I have florals from the Hobby Lobby that I had gotten 90% off. It was at the end of the season. It was last year or the year before. I can't remember. I've had them in my stash for a while. They were originally $10.99, so I got them basically for $1.10 each. Highly recommend waiting until things go on sale. These are far superior in quality to anything I would ever be able to get at the Dollar Tree. So this was such a good get. Then those little other berry looking things, I don't remember where I got them from. I'm thinking it might have been Michael's, but I'm not sure. I think they probably were also on sale. The tag on them said $1.99. I guarantee I didn't pay $1.99 for them. But I am going to be putting these all together in the middle here. We're going to make a swag. This is going to be one time that I do not pull my picks apart the way that I normally do. I'm going to leave them whole, but I am trimming off the bottom of the picks here because they were just a little too long for what we're trying to do. So I'm going to gather them in the middle here. And this is such a quick and easy project, you guys. You can do this in like 5 or 10 minutes. No glue required. It takes just the 5 items. I've got the flowers. I've got my little picks. I'm going to use some wire here in a second that I'm going to show you. And then some ribbon. Is that even 5 items or is that 4? I think that's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 items. 4 items. So grabbing my floral wire. This was something that I picked up in a grab box from Michael's a while back. So I've had it for a while. Honestly, I'm not sure what the cost of it would have been, but I clearly did not pay full price for it. I'm going to wrap this around and around and around from side to side, covering the stems here so that I can make sure that they're nice and secured. Once I have them done like that, I'm going to twist it off with the starting point there, make sure it's nice and secured, bend it in so that I don't have pokey things sticking out. And then I'm going to go ahead and I wanted to say flay them. What is the word for spreading them apart like that? I don't know. I just want to make sure that they are nice and full and lush and evenly distributed. And I'm trying to make them look the same on either side to the best of my ability. I like the symmetry of that. And now I'm taking my picks, gonna trim these down in a second as well because the stems were a little too long. And I'm just tucking them into the wire that I had already established in putting everything together. So I'm going to continue to do that with all 4 of these, tucking them in, doing the same on the other side and tucking them in. Now, you could totally use glue if you decided that you wanted to use hot glue to just secure these a little bit more. I opted not to, and the beauty in that is that if ever I decide that I want to use any of these pieces for another project someday, like if I don't need the swag anymore, if I've grown tired of it and I want to refresh it or whatever else, all I have to do is snip that floral wire and the whole thing will come undone and I can reuse any of these pieces and parts. All right, so now I've got my Kirkland ribbon. Y'all know I love the Kirkland ribbons, but I wanted to create a bow that had a bunch of loops and was kind of all rounded, and I knew that I couldn't do it the way that you normally would do for that type of a bow because this is only a one-sided ribbon. So I was kind of making it up as I went along and trying to get that same effect by doing what I'm doing at the moment. But ultimately I wasn't thrilled with this bow. The bow I think is gorgeous in and of itself, but I wasn't thrilled with it for this project because I felt like it was just too large to do the type of bow that I wanted and to have it come out the way that I had pictured in my head. I think I needed a ribbon that was a little less wide. So I will be saving this bow for another project, but I'll show you here. Like, if you like that, have at it. Do this type of a bow. Again, I think it's pretty. I think it's just too large for the project at hand. So I opted to do a second bow. I was thinking, maybe I just do something really simple. I liked the simplicity, but I decided I wanted to have 2 loops on either side, and I am going to have tails for this now. So if you don't like tails, you don't have to do the tails. I opted to do them. So cut that down. I'm going to make sure I have a nice long piece to create my tails with. Tie it off in the center. I just want to make sure that I'm capturing both ends of the ribbon so that they don't get lost in that, if it doesn't get caught up in the middle tie, then you lose one of your loops, right? So just making sure that that is nice and secure. I'm going to fluff out my bows. I spent a little time just trying to make sure that I had them all a consistent size. And so once I had that all done, I'm just going to mess with it a little bit longer. Oh, tied it tight. There we go. I did mess with it a little bit longer. And then once I had that done, I am going to cut off another piece of ribbon to get it tied around the middle. but here we go. I've got it the way I want it. Gonna grab another piece of ribbon about the same length as that last one, and I'm gonna use this to attach it. Now this did two things. It attached it to the, well, three things really. It attached it to the swag. It's giving it two additional tails, which makes sense because we've got two loops going on either side, but it also kind of made the middle section of the bow a little bit prettier. So it's not quite as squished, if that makes sense. So now I'm going to go ahead and dovetail all of my ends, just folding the ribbon in half and cutting that off at an angle. I ended up trimming some of them down a little bit more than what I initially did, and then I kind of made them wavy. It is a wired ribbon, so it gives you the opportunity to do that. And now all I need is a hanger. So I am using some of my floral wire again. I cut off maybe a 3-inch length. I probably should have done it a little bit longer. It would have been easier to work with, but I tucked one end underneath the wires that were already being used to hold the piece together, and then brought it across to the other, twisted that off and brought it across to the other side, tucked it under the wires on that end, and got that all twisted off. And that was gonna be it. So now we've got a hanger. I'm gonna be able to flip it back over and fluff up my ribbons in just a second. But again, I love these pieces. I hope you love them too. Please do leave me a comment. Let me know which one was your favorite. And thanks so much for watching. DIY number 5. Okay, I've got another one of these 6x6 wood panels, balsa wood. And then I have these little ornaments from the Dollar Tree. I thought they were super cute. I was trying to bend off the little hanger piece at the top, but it ended up damaging the star point a little bit. So I ultimately used my tin snips, I was trying to think of what those were, to cut that away. So I did bend it away a little tiny bit without damaging the others, so that I could get the tin snips in there to snip that off. So I was just being super careful. It's just once I bent it on that first one beyond a certain point, it ended up bending the whole tip of the star. So if you're going to try to pry that away, I recommend that you use tin snips. So now I'm just going to use some hot glue and apply these right onto the wood piece. I just thought it would be cool to see the different colored stars on the background of the wood, and this is going to be another cute little sign for my tiered tray. These are actually metal. They're little, I don't know if they're tin. I'm not really sure what type of metal that they are, but I think that they're really good quality considering the price, and super cute. So now I'm going to be doing exactly what I did before to create a stand, but I don't need to worry about it being warped. So I'm going to just put one popsicle stick across the upper part of our little sign here, and then I'm going to use 2 other popsicle sticks for the kickstand piece of it. So I'm just trying to figure out where it needs to be again. I'm going to add in my hot glue. It was just a 3-finger situation again, so I held my fingers there until it cooled well enough to support itself. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the second little popsicle stick. Now I thought about putting another popsicle stick across the base of the 2 sticks, but I ultimately decided it wasn't needed and it would fit better on my tray that way. DIY number 6. I have these shelf sitter signs from the Dollar Tree, and we are going to be crafting with them, obviously. so, the first thing I wanted to do was peel off the paper sign that's applied to this. Y'all, this was a job and a half trying to get this off. It did not want to peel off of here. As you can see, I started kind of drenching it with water, letting that soak in, using my little spatula to scrape it off. This took a lot of time. If I had to do it again, I would either opt to paint right over it, which probably isn't the best idea, or if you have like a belt sander, like some sort of an electric sander, I would probably just go at it with that. If you have to do it the way I did it, it's possible. It just took a long time. So the next thing I'm going to do is measure off. I started to measure off, I believe this was 8 inches or 10 inches. It might have been 10 inches. I'm trying to remember. I think it was actually, I think it was 10. And I was planning on doing, no, I think it was 8. Sorry. I ended up with using 10 and 8 and a 6-inch piece. My original thought, I think, was to do 8, 7, 6. But then when I lined them up next to each other, I decided I didn't like the way that they looked if they were that short. I wanted them to, not that short. If they had only just an inch difference, I wanted the difference between the levels to be a little bit different. So I ended up with a 10-inch, an 8-inch, and a 6-inch, as you can see them here. And the pieces were, I believe, 18 inches. So I used one full piece and then just 6 inches of the second piece. So I'll keep the other part of that in my stash for a later project. But for now, I have my crimson chalk paint, my Adirondack white, and then my ocean. And I am going to paint these as I have everything lined up here. And then you can see up at the top, I've got little wooden stars that I had pulled out of my stash. Those are also from the Dollar Tree. I'd gotten them in a bundle of a bunch of different little wooden cutouts. So they're coming in handy. And then I also have these little wooden letters that I received from, I believe my sweet subscriber Rose had sent these to me a while back, and I've had them in my stash. I'm using the USA, which I painted in the ocean blue, and I am also painting this tallest piece in ocean as well. And then that the red was the middle-sized piece, and then the smallest, the shortest, is going to be the white that I'll be doing in a moment. But for right now, and I apologize that I'm off screen. I didn't realize I was when I was doing this. I'm using some popsicle sticks, and I am trimming these down. So the wooden pieces are 2 inches wide. So I'm cutting popsicle sticks that are 2 inches long, and I was able to get two 2-inch segments out of each popsicle stick, and I used 3 total popsicle sticks, so I'll have 6 segments of popsicle stick. So now I'm also painting, I painted the popsicle sticks white clearly, and then I painted the stars white as well. So you can see here I am just starting to line these up now that everything is dry, and I'm going to apply my little stripes to the red, and my USA is going to go on the white, and then my little white stars are going to end up on the blue. So those are still drying a little bit, so I didn't want to put them onto the blue just yet. So applying this just with hot glue. You can certainly use a different kind of glue if you want something that's going to be a longer term hold. I find for things like this, the hot glue works just fine. So going to be applying my letters next, and then I will put down the stars. And now I'm going to be ready to put all of the pieces together. So I'm going to stand them up on my surface so I make sure that they all are lined up and flat so that they don't wobble when they're, you know, set out for decor. Now the red I found was kind of wobbling a little bit, and I think it was because I had the end that I'd cut down on the table, so I just flipped it over. And now I'm putting a generous amount of hot glue along the edges of the white and flipping that back up so that it's all sealed together. Now I'm going to make little, oh my goodness, what do you call those on firecrackers? The things that you, fuses, those. So I'm making fuses. I'm just gonna tie a knot a couple of inches down on my jute cord here, jute twine. I'm lining them up to make sure that they're relatively the same length. Probably doesn't matter if they're different lengths. It will give it more character if they are different, but got those all lined up, tied the knots. I cut the jute right at the base of each of those knots, and then I'm just applying a tiny little bit of hot glue. Sorry again that I'm off camera. I need to be a little bit more aware of where I am versus what the camera is capturing. But applying just a tiny bit of hot glue to the base of that so that it doesn't ooze out all over the top of my project. And just tucking that down and having it stand straight up. And this is done. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 7.
All right, I have these little stars again, and the remnants of the other ornaments that I just used. I'm after the beads that are on here right now. You could see I also have out my jute cord as well as some ribbon. That was a nautical ribbon from the Dollar Tree. At least that was the way that it was marketed, but it's red, white, and blue, and it's the right shades, so I am using it for my patriotic decor. So once I got all of the beads off, I went ahead and cut off a length of my jute cord, and I'm going to start stringing all of this on here. I decided I was going to use one of the stars as my little anchor point. I'm not really sure what else you would call it on a tassel, not a tassel, on a garland, but it's going to be the end of my garland. So I did put a little bit of hot glue on the tip of that to help work it through the beads, as this jute cord is rather thick. So I did struggle a little bit with getting it over the double width of the jute. It was fine going over one, but going over that second one, it was a little bit much for it. So just to make things easier for myself, I did add some hot glue to both ends, just because it does start to unravel, and then the more it unravels, the wider it gets. And so once I had that glue on there, it was much easier, even with that second one, although I did, like I said, had to work it a little bit more. So once I had a few of the beads on, I knew I didn't have enough beads to do a full garland, at least not for the length that I wanted to do this. So I knew I was going to need to use something else, and I opted to use ribbon. So I'm going to cut off lengths. I would say these are probably 6 to 8 inch lengths of ribbon. I'm just going to tie it in a knot around the jute cord. And so in addition to this red, white, and blue ribbon, I also grabbed out a red and white checked like gingham mini buffalo check ribbon, which I wasn't really sure about it at first. But then as I started working with the ribbons and getting down the length of the garland, I love this ribbon with it, and I was wishing I had more of it. Unfortunately, I only had enough for 4 little ties, so eventually I'm going to end up having to move some of them, down the length of the garland, and you'll see that in a little bit. But this other ribbon is a blue with silver running through the center of it, also from the Dollar Tree. And then I have a gray with silver running down through it as well that I'm going to add in. I was looking for a white ribbon that is this 1/2 inch thickness, and I didn't have one. So this light gray with the silver was as close as I could get, and I figured that it would complement the garland well. So I tied 4 of these little ribbons onto each section, and then added some more beads on, white, red, and blue. It was the order that I did it in. And then I did go ahead and add on all of the beads at one point because I figured that would help speed things up for me. And then I just tied the ribbon on in between the beads that I had already threaded onto the jute cord. So now as I got down to the end, I had 1 piece of ribbon left of each of the types, of the 3 types. I was out of the red at this point. But I looped the jute cord back around onto itself and threaded it up through those last 3 beads the same way that I had done at the beginning, because I want to tie this off and fasten it off. So once I got it worked up through, you can see I've got that loop there in my right hand. I am going to drop those ribbons into that loop and pull that tight to create kind of like a faux tassel at the end. I did opt to tie each of those in a simple knot at the end as well, just to help anchor them a little bit more. And then I went ahead and also tied off the jute cord and trimmed that off, the tail of the jute cord that had gone back up through the little beads. So here I am readjusting with my red because it was really only enough for 1/3 of the garland. So the first third had the red and then the rest of it didn't. So I'm just reallocating, so to speak, the red ribbon. So I'm just moving it so that the red is a little bit more evenly spaced around the garland. And once I did that, I had it all set. Here's the last one that I was moving. Actually, I might have moved one more. I don't know. I made sure it was more evenly spaced down the length of the garland. And voila, there she is. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 8.
Okay, this is from the Dollar Tree. It's just a little votive holder, and I am using my ocean chalk paint. Now, in hindsight, I wish that I didn't fill in all the little divots. I had my mindset on what I was going to do with this before I started, and I wish I had pivoted as I saw how easy it was just to paint the raised parts of this. So in hindsight, I would have just gone over the surface quickly and left those little divots blank, clear of paint. That was my ocean chalk paint. This is my Adirondack white, and I am painting the inside of this to the same fashion as the outside. Now, had I done what I was just suggesting that I should have done, I could have done the same on the inside and the opposite little divots would have been painted. So I would have ended up with the same effect without having to sand it, which is what I'm going to be doing once this is dry. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm actually thinking I might have liked it better that way too, because then it would have been blue with little white circles rather than white with little blue circles. But anyway, it still turned out really sweet. I still love it. I hope you will love it too. But I went ahead and used my heat gun to help dry it. And once it was dry and also cool enough, because this is glass and it heats up very quickly, I went ahead and grabbed my sanding block and I sanded it down. This particular sanding block is, pretty much beat. So I was having to work it a little bit. I should have grabbed a new piece of sandpaper, but I made it work. But you can see I'm just kind of wearing it away and you can see the white coming through. And once that was all done, I grabbed a little piece of floral foam. I cut it in half because it was a little too wide for my piece, and I stacked it and add a little bit of glue to each of the four corners. I'm not putting it all throughout because if I do that, I won't be able to stick things down through it because the glue will prevent that. So you just want to be mindful if you glue your floral foam together that you don't want to be blocking the stuff that you're trying to stick through the floral foam. So I glued that to the bottom, and then I decided I wanted to paint it white, at least the top area that could be seen or visible if somebody were to just take a peek down inside of it. So used my Adirondack white for that. And once that was dry, I was ready to add my little doodads. This little piece is from the Hobby Lobby, I believe. I've had it in my stash for a while. And then I think I might have gotten these flags from the Hobby Lobby as well, but I've had them literally for probably 3 or 4 years, you guys. They've just been in my stash. So adding these in, the flags I put in at different heights. And I think this is cute, but let me know what you think.
DIY number 9.
All right, this is a piece of wood from the Home Depot or Lowe's or something. I can't remember. It's been in my stash for a while, but I was showing you that it's about 3/4 of an inch thick and 2.5 inches wide, and I believe it was 24 inches long. So I'm in my Cricut design space. I just put together something saying "God bless America." And I am, I played around with a bunch of different fonts until I found one that I liked for this. So this is a free font that I'm using in Cricut. I am hard pressed to remember what the name of it was, but I will have to look that up if that's of interest to you. Running it through my Cricut Joy, getting this all cut out, very simple design. I am going to be using this as a stencil. So once I had it cut, I'm going to have the machine go ahead and unload it. I'll pull it off of my little mat. I was using smart vinyl, but I was using a scrap of smart vinyl, so I did need to use the mat for it. And I'm going to cut the stencil down so that the words are each separate. I also didn't want to have a ton of space around the words on the edges, on the right and left side of each word, because I wanted to be able to get everything centered as I work. And I figured the easiest way to do that would be to have an equal amount of space on either side. So you're going to see me trimming this down even a little bit more on the sides, or at least on one side, depending on where my word is showing up on the vinyl. But just going to get this all weeded. This went really quickly. Nice big chunky letters are good for that. I did have that little bit of the center of that A that I needed to make sure stayed down. So I'm always just mindful of smaller pieces like that as I work. So once these were all weeded, as I mentioned here, I'm trying to think about how I want to make sure that it's going to be centered. So I am going to trim this down. I do want to leave a little bit of an edge because again, this is going to be used as a stencil, and I want to make sure that I'm not going to be ending up going off the edge of the stencil and making a mess on my piece. So I'm trimming this one down as well. It's not going to make a whole heck of a lot of difference for this last word. You'll see what I mean in just a few moments, but I've got it all ready to go. And now I am going to cut down my wood piece. I'm going to be using the same measurements as before, 6, 8, and 10, which actually totals to 24 inches, which is exactly the length of this piece of wood. So I'll just be using the entire piece, just cut into 3 sections of varying lengths, using my little miter box for that, sanding off the rough edges just to make sure everything is good to go. And I'm going to paint each of them with my chalk paint. This is Ocean. This time I'm not using the Adirondack white. This is called Plaster, so it's an off-white. And then my crimson. And then I'm ready, once this was dry, I was ready to go ahead and apply my stencil. So I'm using my transfer tape to get the stencil, I'm going to call it stencil, the vinyl, onto the project. Flipping that over, I'm going to get it lined up and centered as best as I can, trying to make sure that I'm keeping the word straight as well. And then I will peel away the transfer tape after I burnish it, and it'll be good to go for stenciling. I'm going to do that with each of these pieces, getting everything prepped. When you're applying something like this, you just want to make sure you work slowly, and you can see I'm kind of wiggling the transfer tape back and forth, just taking my time. This is sped up 2.5 times. So just to keep that in mind, I am taking my time. This is where I'm like, it's not going to make much difference. I totally realized that I was thinking this was going to be 12 inches and it's 10. And so I had to do it again. And I couldn't figure out at the time how to get that same font. I think I actually did figure it out, but then it didn't occur to me to put it back to the original font. I ended up using a different font for the America to make sure that it could fit. But I'm not super disappointed that it's a different font. I think it's kind of cool, actually, that it's a separate font from the God Bless. Goodness. Only me. But now I'm going to go over these stencils with the same shade as the background shade first. And the reason I'm doing that is to lock in the stencil so that I don't get bleeding. Some people use Mod Podge to do this. I usually only use Mod Podge if I'm working with a natural wood surface. If I'm using paint, I will use the same color paint. I just find that it camouflages better. If you get leaks with the Mod Podge and you're not using Mod Podge over the entire surface of a project, it can create like a little bit of a sheen here and there, and it doesn't necessarily hide the mistakes quite as well. Not mistakes, but the bleeding, if you know what I mean. So I'm just gradually going over it. Once the paint color was dry, I went over it with my makeup sponge with my Adirondack white this time. And that was why I had done the second block in the plaster. And I'm wishing that I'd gone with an even creamier color. I wanted it to still be white, but I wanted the white on white to stand out. I'm not sure that it stands out quite enough to my liking, but I had seen something like this online somewhere, and I thought, oh, that's kind of neat. You could do a white on white, and so I tried it. In hindsight, I probably should have used a different color, but for the lettering, but it still looks nice, I think. So peeling away this last bit for America. And it did pull away some of my paint here and there, so I did just come in with a tiny little brush and do some touch-ups where needed. All right, once everything was dry, I'm ready to put it together. So I'm just using my hot glue again, running a bead between the boards, making sure that it's not extending beyond the smaller of the two each time. So just making sure I've got everything lined up and evenly spaced, that is, centered, and just making sure that it is on there solid. And again, this one is done. I'm going to flip it down here for you to see, and let me know what you think of this one.
DIY number 10.
All right, this is a little whiteboard from the Dollar Tree. I was thinking about painting the back side of it and doing my project on the back side of this. First I pulled off that little tag, and I'm going to use some sandpaper to sand away the little adhesive residue, get that all cleaned up. And then I was getting ready to paint it, and then I was like, well, wait a minute, that side's white, and I was going to paint this white. Maybe I should just do it on this side. So I decided I was going to use the white side. After all, this is my sapphire blue Arteza paint marker. So I'm going to just shake that up and get it ready. Now, one thing with the paint markers from Arteza, if you're not familiar with them, they have dual points on them. So they give you this little tweezer. I'm about to flip this point across my table because I couldn't hold on to it properly. But they have a dual point. So I flipped it around, and now I have a fine point on my paint marker. So I started to do my little message on here, and you know, I'm getting there. I'm like, wait a minute, I needed this centered. I didn't make it big enough. Now I'd started to put that cap back on there. You might have noticed me doing that. If you do that with the fine point on the Arteza paint markers, you will smush the point. The cap is not deep enough to cover up the fine point tip. You have to flip it back around and give it the blunt tip before you put the cap on. Just a word from experience. So here I'm going to go again. You saw me kind of air drawing because I am visual. I needed to get an idea of where to place my my letters to get this where I wanted it on the piece this time. And I am hand lettering this, obviously. You could certainly use a stencil. If you have a Cricut machine, you could use that. I just opted to do the hand lettering because I enjoy it, and I don't know, I feel like it gives things a little bit more charm at times. Granted, it's not always as professional looking, so if you're looking to sell your work, I do recommend using a Cricut unless you have really great hand lettering. Now, my first run at it never looks all that great, but it lays the foundation. And so now I am coming back through, and I'm going to do a faux calligraphy on all of these to finish up the hand lettering, which I always think makes it look much nicer. And I'm generally pleased with my final product when I do this. And this piece was no exception. So I'm just going to continue working on all of the downstrokes. So anywhere, if you think about when you draw a letter, anytime you're working your way from top to bottom on the letter stroke, that's where you're going to widen it. So I almost tried to put that cap on again. So I'm going to try and pull this out of here without flinging it. So get that turned back around. And then once I've got that dull side up, I can put my cap on. So now this is vermilion chalk paint, or not chalk paint, excuse me, acrylic paint in my acrylic paint marker by Arteza. So the same pack of paint markers, but using the vermilion now. Just adding in some little stars. Fill in some of those white spaces. I am not real great at drawing stars, y'all. Clearly, they're just, they needed help. So I at least got the base down, and then I had to kind of go back through and fill in some of the spots because they looked just lopsided to me. But of course, every time I did one side, then another side looked like it needed help. So probably should have quit while I was ahead right there, but of course I kept going. So one more here, I think, and then we'll call it. Nope, one more. There we go. All right. So there is that. And I think this is really sweet, very simple, but let me know what you think.
DIY number 11.
All right, this is a little family sign from the Dollar Tree, and that star was a set of 2 little ornaments. I had used some stars like that in a project a couple of weeks ago, and we are going to make this, give this a patriotic flair, this little family sign. It's super cute. I'm going to be using red, white, and blue paint, and I'm trying to figure out the order here. I am going to alternate them, and I'm going to start out with my white paint. So I was just trying to identify which letters we're going to get the white. It's going to be the A and the I. And I'm starting with the white because, to be honest, it's going to be the easiest to cover up if I make a mistake. So I am not being super careful with the white as I apply this because I know I'm going to be able to go over it with the red and the blue. And this is going to give me an opportunity to just make sure that my lines, that there are no gaps in my colors, if that makes sense. So just making sure I'm hitting all of the edges on both of those letters. I did, because I'm having to kind of smoosh the paint through there, I did end up painting the back of the family sign because I'm just a little extra. And I like it to look nice and clean. Not that anybody's going to be looking down inside the sign, but you never know. So then I did the crimson on the F and the L. Got those nice and touched up. I'm just using small, relatively stiff brushes to make sure that I have a little bit more control over where I'm depositing the paint. It looks like I'm going super fast here. Again, I do have this video slowed down to, sped up to about 2.5 times the actual speed. So I was going 2.5 times slower than what it looks like. The ocean blue is being used for my M and my Y. These are the exact same paint colors, by the way, that I used on the first project. So I've got the crimson, the Adirondack white, and the ocean blue. And I'm not being super careful about the base because I'm going to be painting that base in Java. It's actually not quite Java. I'll explain that in a minute. But in the meantime, I got it nice and dry so that I could work with it. I'm going to be applying the star using that little loop on there to my advantage to hook it behind the eye. And I'm just making sure that it's bent properly so that it's straight on with the sign. It was kind of like leaning back a little bit at first, if that makes any sense. And I'm just trying to figure out the best way to apply it here. It is a 3-dimensional little star. It is not flat, so I'm not able to just lay it down on the surface like that because it just won't adhere properly if I try to do it that way. That's why I'm holding it the way I am. I did wait until it was cooled down enough for me to touch it, so please don't fear. I did not burn myself making this project. Again, this is sped up, so I'm just being very careful. So I did pull away some of that little glue that I had applied, so I'm applying some more just to secure it. But then, of course, I felt like it was oozing over the top of the
I did not burn myself. I was trying to get it to cool, and also there was like a strand of hot glue that I was trying to remove there. That's what all of that flailing around was. But once I had that situated and made sure that it was nice and secure, I was good to go with painting the base of it. Again, I think this is so cute. I'm so happy with these projects today, you guys. But I've got my Java, or what I thought was my Java. Again, I'll explain in a second. And my masking tape. I'm just going to apply some masking tape along the bottom of the letters there so that I can paint that base. Now, what I kept saying about the Java, this was clearly the dregs of my jar. And when I started applying it, I realized that at some point, because I haven't used it in a while, so I didn't remember doing this, I must have added some water, but I also must have added some black paint to it. I don't remember what that project was that I had done, but it definitely was not the thickness nor the color that I anticipated. I was honestly okay with the color because I'd been debating whether I wanted to use brown or black. I did opt for the brown because I thought it would be a little softer look. And it was still softer than a full-on black would have been, but this is definitely darker than your regular Java by Home Decor. I can see it on there that it's Home Decor, this instance.
Okay, everybody, that's it for today. If you enjoyed the projects, please remember to give me a big thumbs up, leave me a comment, let me know which one was your favorite, and until the next time, be well, be kind, and make it a great day. Thank you so much for watching. Take good care. Bye.